from the person writing the cheque. As Peace mentioned, I've got a long history. I started my career actually in mining finance, which is what first brought me to having to look at finance in Africa. I then shifted across to infrastructure and energy. I won't go over the ground that Peace has, but I'd say I've been on all sides of the table. I've been a lender, I've been the equity investor, I've been a project developer, and I've been inside government in putting together PPPs. So some of my examples when we talk about PPPs won't necessarily be from the power sector. They'll be from other sectors. The principles are pretty much the same, and I'll highlight some of the risks better because they're things that I've actually experienced. Very quickly on Axle Tree, what we are is we're focused on the application of technology to issues of sustainability. That means principally focused on energy, water and waste, and as applied in industries that are hard to abate, manufacturing and minerals processing, building and construction, transport and agriculture. We're whole of life cycle, so we will do venture capital, but we will also invest in utility scale projects. Yeah, so really, as I say, I'm looking at this from the perspective of an investor and thinking about PPAs and PPP as just some of the tools that we use to help attract the funding. So I'd like to ask you to think about now the biggest barriers to projects that you've worked on. And what's been the barrier to getting investment into your project? Is it perceptions of technology risk? Is it there just isn't capital available? Regulatory uncertainty? Investors worried about currency risk? Is the development capability there in your market? Is there community acceptance of what you're trying to do? And then we'll go through my presentation and we'll revisit that and see if there's anything in my presentation that changes your views on that. Okay. That's interesting. Okay, I think we close that off. Lack of capital, regulatory uncertainty in the capability, currency not so much, and pleased to see technology very low down on the list. Where am I going here? Okay, so make sure I'm in the right place. So what do investors look for? Cash flow. In the end, that's what your investment is. It's your writing a cheque that's going to produce for you a stream of cash in the future. You want to have some certainty that you're going to get that back, and you're rewarded for taking a certain amount of risk. Investors look for strong governance. They want to know how decisions are being made, that the right kind of decisions are being made. They need to have their contracts with credible counterparties who are capable of meeting their obligations for their part of the project, and clear exit pathways. Maybe not such a big issue for the type of investments we're talking about. If you have a boot project, that's built in. If you're building a business You may, while a project may finish, your business may continue. But the principle is that capital follows certainty. It needs rules around it, what it's doing. So that leads to some very simple questions. Who pays? Who's your customer? Have they got the capability? Do they need what you're selling them? In this case, power. Can they pay for it? Will they pay for it? And will I get my money back? For an investor, that's what you're worried about. And I was pleased to see the thing in the poll is the real risks. Projects rarely fail because of the technology. When you're doing a large-scale deployment, it's almost certainly proven technologies and they work. Most of the technology improvements are just tweaking, making them more efficient, making them slightly cheaper, but they work. Projects fail for other reasons. Political risk, regulatory risk, the currency risk, your customer, community risk, which is there is resistance to your project, and in the execution of it. You have a construction company that isn't capable of doing it. You have an operator that can't run it efficiently. So let's have a look at why governments use PPPs. A lot of people assume that they do it because they haven't got the money to do it, the project themselves. That's People see it as a financing mechanism. It's not. It's a government procurement mechanism for a service, or an asset that they need to implement government policy. They are looking at things like technology transfer, bringing in private sector expertise that they don't have within government specialists. Faster delivery, you generally find that the private sector is able to deliver projects more quickly, generally with better cost control. They're looking for risk sharing. There are risks that governments cannot take, some of the market risks. They can use to introduce competition into a market, so driving overall economic efficiency. Tied to that is benchmarking. You see some privatisations will often set up competing businesses so that for regulatory purposes, the government can benchmark the different businesses against one another. And then there's just the local capability building. You build up your workforce. Um, yeah. So what PPPs do is allocate the risk. And one of the basic principles of project financing for anything, whether it's power, whether it's mining, whatever, is you allocate the risk to the party best able to manage it. Now, that little diagram there, that is a risk assessment matrix from a water pipeline project. And it's assessing what are the priority risks, where do they come from, and how they mitigate it. And your contractual structure under your PPP will look at how you allocate the risk to ensure it's mitigated effectively in the ways in that list. You don't need to look at the detail of that, but that's the kind of thinking that goes into structuring a PPP. What are the priority risks? Who can best manage them? It's project finance 101. Second thing about PPPs is that they create markets. The governments aren't just building infrastructure, they're building whole industries. They're looking to meet economic, environmental, and social needs. You might look at a power project, but it's also a power project might also be health, might be education. It might allow you to have a water treatment plant. Getting power in might be you have a water treatment plant with better health outcomes. You've got lights in a village to do your homework. It's not just about getting the electricity there. There are other social objectives. The other thing they can do is that they can create other markets. Well, there are things that governments can't do. The private sector can. We had a project where we had one anchor business. We had some offtake from other parties, but to make it economic, we had to generate a new industry alongside it to use the full capacity efficiently. Government's not set up to do that. The private sector is. Problems can also arise in this sector if governments think that they can do it better. And I'll give an example there of a project in Australia that I worked on. There were two competitors bidding for this project. The government asked them to join forces. We looked at it and we thought, yes, we can. This makes sense. So we spent about a year on that tendering process. It would have been 18 months to project completion from there. Then the government changed their mind after we wasted all that time and our tendering costs, decided to do it themselves. At that point in time, I took a contract in Abu Dhabi, moved to the Middle East for 4 years, and came back after that 4 years was up and found that they'd only just completed the project themselves. That is not conducive to creating investor confidence. What is creating an environment where people have an amount of certainty, you have a known process, people understand what the intentions are. And I happened to come across the EcoWaste PPP framework a few years ago when it had just been put in. Um, I was doing some work with Stanford Seed, the firm in Senegal, and they were working on a PPP project, and the new framework had just come in place, and they were able to attract significant investment from a European institutional investor and from a US technology provider because it was rules that were well understood. Every country, it is a framework, so every country has to enact its own rules, and the legislation might vary from country to country, but the rules of the game are known and understood by everyone. That's that helps to attract investment. Um, the next thing is to understand and here's another stakeholder wheel similar to the one that Peace put up earlier, understanding that. So every project affects things that people are already doing, affects their job, creates jobs, affects what people are doing now, it affects budgets, affects the amount of influence people have. I looked at PPPs in the Middle East that would have taken out chunks of a business that was or a government business that was under one person's control, and they were resisting that because of the status of having that many employees and that many helicopters, and the prestige there affected the way you had to go about doing that business. So you need to know who benefits from the project, who loses, who gains power, who loses power, and manage that process to ensure that, first of all, it allows you to execute the project and keep the project operating. Turning to PPAs, what a PPA does, provides revenue certainty. It's about uh, bankability, but it's not, purpose isn't to create the revenue, it's to make it predictable. As if you go back to my earlier thing, what do investors look for? Predictability. They want to know how they're getting paid, that they are getting paid. PPA is the cleanest way to do that. But then that comes to, who is your PPA with? And they're not all the same. It's really a continuum of credit quality. Multinationals generally are going to be reasonably good credit. Smaller mining companies, not so, but at least they have an operation that you can judge the economics of. They're probably getting paid in foreign currency. Industrial users, maybe the same, maybe a little more vulnerable, more likely to be local. The national utilities, well, some may have strong balance sheets, some may not. Does the government stand behind them or not, and to what degree? Then you have the communities, community-based projects, who individually might not be great credits, but you get a big enough pool and it's bankable. So those are the questions in your PPA. What is your credit quality? Who is your off-taker? Understanding that they're going to be there. Are they going to be there for long? How long is the mining company going to operate, for example? You need to know that your contract, all the usual things, you need to know your contract's enforceable. What currency is it in? For a mining company, you might write it PPA in US dollars, for example. You think about it, your equipment may be in euros or in yuan or in euros. You know, it could be in your operating costs are going to be in local currency. What are your currency exposures? Again, Peace touched on this. This is a very important piece of the equation, particularly for Africa, where there is only really a small number of international investors who are familiar and comfortable in the environment. I'll use the French infrastructure fund that I've worked with in Senegal as one example. It was interesting to see BlackRock there. They're a small number. Traditionally, capital has mainly flowed from investment capital has mainly flowed from the UK and Europe. The US comes and goes, increasingly from China, the Middle East in some areas of Africa. But these kind of agencies, particularly the multilaterals, World Bank, IFC, African Development Bank, they are very important for giving the confidence to the investor. And there's a number of reasons. for that, which I'll come to in a sec. Export credit agency is important. If most of the equipment you'll be using is going to be manufactured elsewhere, can help with concessional financing rates, insurances for the investors, concessional climate finance. They all go into the mix, and they all reinforce one another. They all help align interests so that everyone's going in the same direction. But focus on the multilaterals. So they give a project credibility. They've helped design the frameworks that we're using here for PPPs. So they impose a level of governance on the projects that they finance. They keep the procurement discipline. They set environmental standards. They help with political risk, both through insurance, but also just being able to persuade the governments that they're dealing with to behave in a way that allows the project to proceed. So while the funds are obviously nice, sometimes it's the confidence they give to investors is more important. Having them there, knowing that they can help ensure that you're going to get your money back. The other thing, particularly applicable to Africa, is the impact of new technologies. It's changed the investment landscape for renewable energy or for energy. The old days, you had large-scale generation assets, long transmission lines, centralised infrastructure. Now you've got low-cost solar, batteries, smart controls. You can produce it where it's consumed, have much more distributed generation. If you look at how Africa sort of skipped a generation in telecommunications, went straight to mobile technologies, where there's no developed grids. You don't need to go through that stage now. You've got technologies that can allow you to deal on a much smaller localised scale in a cost-effective manner. So say this is and this is also an issue in Australia and other places, I might add. I think this slide's fairly self-explanatory. So is it investable? Without government support at the small scale, probably not. Get enough individual units in there, villages, you get diversification. Yes, it is. So aggregation, standardisation of your contractual arrangements, build a portfolio of the assets. You replicate it, you can roll it out, keep rolling it out, looks the same wherever you put it. That's financial. That's financeable. Global examples that are relevant here. First Nations renewable energy partnerships in Canada, where the local peoples have ownership in the projects and take benefits from them. The First Nations Clean Energy Network in Australia has borrowed a lot from that, and we've worked with them, and they have got some very good guidelines about how to bring communities into, small remote communities into, or give them access to renewable energy, but also the benefits of renewable energy being developed for nearby mining or other operations. You have your mini grids in Africa, and the big one is mining can be a driver for a lot of these things. They're usually remote locations, they're employment, you're building new communities, those communities may last longer than the mine. communities, communities can be real partners in these things. They get benefits from it, and in turn they give people like the mining companies their social license to operate in their region. Um, and I'll just go back to there are other benefits that should be recognised when we're talking about communities. Um, the developers should recognise the social licence aspects of it. I worked on a hydro project in the Philippines, and there's some jobs during construction, but not a lot operating. But the project was very favourably received by the local village because the development company built a bridge over the river that flooded for 3 months of the year during the typhoon season. And all of a sudden they had year-round access to the main market town. So developers need to be mindful of the local communities. The last piece of that is, and it ties in with PPAs a bit, is carbon markets and the risk in policy. If I look at some of you may be aware of Cocoa Networks, which is a company that operated in Kenya. One of the founders is actually a friend of mine I met while working in Abu Dhabi. What they did was bioethanol cooking stoves, and they had a system of dispensing machines, and they were replacing wood as a primary fuel for cooking and heating. They subsidised that. They had over 1 million households in Kenya. They'd invested 300 million in their infrastructure, but the economic model relied on the sale of carbon credits into compliance markets, and the Kenyan government did not sign off on the sale of those. So the economic model collapsed. And so what had been touted as being a unicorn, about to list for $1 billion, shut up shop. I don't know that earlier this year. I don't know what's happened to the customers that were relying on them, that had changed to the cleaner fuels. But if your economic model relies heavily on policy, on particular things like carbon markets, you need to be wary. Investors can price risk, they can't price the uncertainty. So what do you need to do? Bankable cash flows. Who's paying? Are they credit worthy? Strong governance. And then the other bits, particularly if European investors in particular, the sustainability reporting requirements, alignment with their taxonomy and how they measure impact are important. They are also conscious of community engagement because that reduces the political risk associated with the project. There's broad community support. But you can't overlook their reporting requirements and the sustainability reporting. And that will go through to things like supply chains, ownership structures. They will go back a long way. But you have to do it if you want the money from those sources. So really, this is the 5 things to take away from this. Best is finance cash flows, not technology. At the level we're talking about, technology works. can use PPAs to create predictable revenues. PPPs help you align the risks and incentives. Communities and governments should be partners, not obstacles. They can very quickly become both. One, if you as a developer misbehave. Two, if government misbehaves. When you have all those things aligned, the capital is available wherever you are. So if we go back, question at the start, what makes a project investable? Proven technology, access to capital, government support, strong management, predictable cash flows. What do we think? Yep. All the other things are good. But knowing what you're going to get paid, when, by whom, being reasonably confident that you will, is what it's all about. So really, that's my final statement there is, the main constraint. It's not technology. It's now organising capital, getting the risk allocation right, aligning incentives. PPP is one way, PPA is another, but it's part of the whole mix that you need. No, that's predictable cash flows. So I'm happy if anyone wants to contact me looking for any more information. I'm open to that. I think Peace gave you a very good list of sources for a lot of this material, some of which I had on my list to suggest as well. But I'd be happy to take inquiries from anyone after this. But that's me done, and I think we'll ready to move on to the next.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Matthew. Can we just give you a round of applause? Thanks so much. Thanks so much. A lot of questions already in the chats. So I know we're all ready for the Q&A, but let's just take a short break. So by 5:00 for Nigerian time, in 5 minutes, we'll start the Q&A. So we could just get a glass of water, I'll take some coffee. So a lot of questions are in the chat. So once we come back, we'll start with the questions. So we have a 20-minute Q&A session. So do also drop your question. We'll try to answer as many as we can because we already have 7 questions before the session. So just do well to drop them. And in case we don't get to your question, don't be angry with us. We'll try to do an FAQ after the call to ensure we can respond to you. Right. So thank you very much for staying up till now. So just go on a short break.
Yeah, I'll leave my slides up in case we want to go back to them during the Q&A.
The effects of climate change are fast becoming a menace to the world. This is no time to cast blame, but everyone must come together, deploying innovative solutions to ensure global temperature rise doesn't exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. Reports show that the chances are slim, but with the rapid development of clean tech solutions, the mission to a more sustainable future is possible. At Chemotronics, we are integrating digital solutions to accelerate the development of clean tech solutions across various communities, fast-tracking our journey to net zero. We have built a decentralized monitoring, reporting, and verification system to rectify the current issues plaguing the carbon credit market. With our solution, financing and developing clean energy solutions will be faster, cheaper, and easier, ensuring a smoother pathway to net zero. The digital technologies currently utilized involve the combining power of AI, blockchain, clean energy, and IoT to offset greenhouse gas emissions. Our smart IoT device provides real-time monitoring of GHGs, which will help companies and governments align with their ESG goals. To guarantee authenticity, the data is logged onto a decentralized storage, which will help companies offset GHGs and enable purchasing quality carbon credits from pilot projects developed across the world. Our solution provides a network of collaboration between developing and developed countries, fast-tracking our commitment to tripling renewable energy access across the globe, while drastically reducing emissions to achieve net zero in the shortest possible time. This will help accelerate biogas, hydrogen, solar farms, and clean tech solutions, creating at least 10,000 jobs over the next 5 years, impacting over 1 million individuals through the instrument of effective climate financing, while offsetting and avoiding at least 100,000 tons of GHGs in the next 5 years. Chemotronics is changing the narrative of the carbon market to achieve our climate goals. Together, let's journey to achieve a sustainable future. The effects of climate change are fast becoming a menace to the world. This is no time to cast blame, but everyone.
Are we back together? Okay. So just want to confirm if Matt okay. I'm going to be sure Matt is here with us before I move forward. Okay. All right. So basically we'll just move into the Q&A now. And you could just follow us on our social media pages if you've not. So we're on LinkedIn, IG, and X, just to stay in line or in tune with what we are doing. All right. So you could also share the YouTube link. We are live streaming so that everyone can be a part of the Q&A session. Right. So we have some questions in the chat, but I also have some here which were sent over before the call started. So let me start with the very first one here. So these attendee wrote, from Exotree Capital's perspective, what are the most common weaknesses you see in PPAs across Africa that prevents promising energy projects from reaching financial close or final investment decision? So I don't know if Matthew would respond to this. I think you touched a little. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Look, I have to say that the PPAs in Africa that I've looked at have been actually quite good, and there have been projects that have gone on to close. the main one that I've looked at was with the Botswana government for 12, I think it was 12 solar plants. And that was fairly standard, and it had a good solid offtake. I think the PPAs are generally fairly straightforward, and the main things I would be looking for is one, the counterparties, the strength of them, and that would probably be that. I suspect that is likely to be the biggest weakness, is who the purchaser actually is and what their capacity is. I don't think there'd be much wrong with the structure of the agreements. There would be, do the market arrangements and rules in that jurisdiction allow you to do what you're trying to do in the PPA? So I haven't looked at enough, or haven't seen enough that have gone wrong to make to give a definitive answer on this. My suspicion is it's be the quality of the counterparties rather than the structure of the documents. I'd be looking at the rules in the jurisdiction governing them. But the ones that I've looked at most closely have actually been fairly standard and quite strong.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. So I think just to recap on the answer you gave, so you are saying that the PPAs have been majorly good, but
Yeah, I think
probably
that,
just the policies are around the government might have been the issue. Is that correct?
I think it's the two things are making sure they're enforceable and that they match the market rules in the jurisdiction that you're in. But I suspect it's the quality of the counterparty, the credit worthiness of the counterparty would, I suspect, be the biggest issue with PPAs. So the way, as I say, the ones I've seen have been fairly straightforward and standard. They don't have to be complicated documents.
Yeah. So I mean, just to be clear, the counterparty is the off-taker, right?
Yes, the off-taker.
Okay. So I think that was one of the major things you highlighted in your presentation.
Yes.
That most times when you have multinationals as off-takers, it's very easy to get funding for the project. But when you have like smaller groups of people, or maybe smaller companies as off-takers,
Smaller companies.
people are really, people are worried about their credit worthiness.
Communities. Yeah, so you need to build a bigger portfolio. And who is the counterparty when you have a community? Do you have to set up an organisation to be the initial customer, and then it has, so you're dealing with multiple layers. I don't think that's a weakness.
Thank you very much.
I think that's something to be dealt with.
Yeah, sure. So I want you to take this question in line with that. So this is from the chat. I think this is from Mr. or Engineer Ebele Chukwu. So he's saying that how do I assess funds for C&I projects, commercial and industrial projects, as he has potential customers, but there's a situation whereby there is an option for instrumental payments of a power as a service model. So the customer wants a PAS model for payments. So he's asking that how does he assess funds for this kind of C&I project?
Sorry, just I just missed some of that. You just repeat that, please.
Okay, so I come again. This question is how can he access funds for commercial and industrial projects?
Projects.
He currently has C&I customers, and their own option of payments is for power as a service model. So they want instrumental payments. So he's asking
Right.
of how we could access funds to develop this kind of projects.
Look, C&I projects, there are a number of different models there. One is, who is the customer, and it's just are they going to be able to pay? The model of how their payments come and is calculated is just something you need to assess against your own costs of providing the service. The other thing that for C&I type customers to look at would be putting it behind the meter, and so it becomes an integral part of their operation. They may themselves be the logical investor.
Okay, so I think all I'll just say is probably the person could mail you after for much
Yes,
more insights. Yes, so I
yes.
think if we send you a mail.
There are different ways of doing that.
Yeah,
I mean, we're looking at.
yes.
I'm looking at one at the moment. Actually, it's a waste to energy project, and we have a potential industrial partner in that, and they're a recycling business, and the waste that's being used in this waste to energy is non-recyclable plastic, and so they can control part of the feedstock process, and they use power in their other operations, and so we're thinking, well, we might still own the plant, but we'll put it inside the fence, and it just serves that user.
Okay, so I'll just say that for engineer Ebele Chukwu, you could just I said Ebube Chukwu, sorry, I said Ebele. This engineer Ebube Chukwu, you could just send a mail to Matthew
So
after
send
this
it to
call.
me, and I'll have a look at it because you can tailor it very
Yeah,
specifically to the client, I think.
yeah. So I think similarly for Shamsuddin Omar is also a personal question. So I think you should send him a mail after the call. Then the second one I'll be taking in the chat now is what is the structure of a PPA? This is from Aviz Ajibade. So the question is, what is the structure of a PPA? I guess you've mentioned that during the call, but maybe you just want to re-echo it.
Sorry, what is the
structure of a PPA? That was his question.
what is the structure of PPA? Well, it can be,
Yeah.
again, it can vary. It can be you can have a take or pay, so you have to pay whether you take power from the plant or and even if you don't use it, you pay as though you had. You can have it can be just pay for what you use and you have a fixed price, or you can have a price that's linked to whatever index you choose. It can be linked to a market price if you're in a place that has um, a traded market in power. You can have basically you can build some options in, so you can pay just to have access to spare capacity. It really depends on what you as the user, what the user profile is like, and what your generation profile is like, and what storage capacity you have, how you structure it. You can have a pure commodity charge, which is how much power you use for a price, or you can have you pay me whether you use it or not, or you can have a payment that you reserve that capacity for me. There are different ways of breaking it up, or you can have elements of each.
Okay, so I think the second and third questions here are similar to what you've touched on, because what we have
Yes.
is about creditworthiness. I think you touched on that earlier, because of I think I'll just move on to Hugh's question, because you talked about something on a currency exchange. I think this is
Yes.
one major issue. So how should governments and lenders collaborate on foreign exchange risks without making electricity tariffs unaffordable? So I think it's similar to the question James asked
Yes.
in the chat. Who was our
And
former speaker last
and
year?
it's a good one. The governments are the people in the best position possibly to manage it. Depending on if yes. So if it's, well, depending on your end user as well. So if you have a mining project, their revenues are probably in US dollars, so you could pass it through. But um, the main one is government probably, for most purposes, government probably needs to absorb it. That's particularly in countries where there is a pegged currency. Well, yeah, the, I'm thinking out loud here. The other thing, the government probably has the capacity to enter into a long-term foreign exchange swap. So the government would have the balance sheet to provide a hedging product that the private sector party might not be able to do.
Okay. So I think what you're emphasizing is the government has a very major role in terms
I
of
think so.
protecting. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just drop your mail in the chats, because I said there are a lot of questions and I don't think we can fake everything. So what I'll just advise is they should
and some of
send
them,
you.
some of them I'd like to give some more thought to, and give a proper written answer.
Okay. So I'll drop your mail in the chat shortly. So let me move on to the remaining two questions. Okay, so this one is about at what point should you request for concessional financing from development banks to
I
catalyze
think
private
you
investment?
always involve them as early as you can. As soon as you have a clear formulated concept for the project, get them in there, make sure you can meet their requirements. They will, just them being there will give the institution, will give investors confidence on governance, on political risk, apart from the economics of being able to get some concessional financing. Just get them in early. They will give good advice, and there's no point in going too far down the track and finding that you've done something that you've done that could have been done differently is precluding them from coming in. Get them in early.
All right. So I'll just take the final question here. If you were advising African governments today, what single reform in PPP procurement or PPA structuring would unlock the next 100 billion US dollars of private investments into the continent's energy sector? So this is more about policy reforms.
I think PPP procurement is just make sure that your country's legislation reflects the wider frameworks that people are used to and understand.
Okay.
That is that on the PPPs. On the PPAs, look at how government can help aggregate the demand for distributed generation and the smaller units, how they can help aggregate that into a single credit structure that's investable, whether it's them standing as an intermediary somewhere, providing some level of guarantees, but allowing the aggregation to assisting the aggregation of the small units of demand. If you think about it, if they'd been doing it in the old days, they would have been putting themselves at risk for a whole transmission grid. It's probably less risk to them and less cost to them to provide some kind of support to community-based initiatives that allow those community-based initiatives to be aggregated.
So it's more about them developing policies that makes it easier for communities to be able to pay the tariffs for those projects. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So
that's part of the PPP thing. Is the government should be looking at what's an affordable tariff to the end consumer. If that doesn't meet the return requirements of the investors, the government needs to look at, do the wider economic and social benefits of that justify me topping up the tariff so that the investor can make their required return?
Okay.
That's the PP. That's always the PPP question. If I have to put some money in to get the investors their return, do the other benefits outweigh the cost? All
right. Thanks so much. So the last question. So I will just say every other person should send a mail. The mail is in the chat, so you can send a mail to Matthew. But the last question I have for you, Matthew, here is from Gideon Oyeyinka. What do you think about securitization as a de-risking tool for energy investments, particularly in development of large-scale solar PV projects? So I'll come again. What do you think about securitization as a de-risking tool for energy investments, particularly in the development of large-scale solar PV projects?
I think securitization is achievable. You get, again, it's getting that diversified scale portfolio of underlying credits in it. If you think about actually mortgage securitization is a good analogy. You get a whole lot of little mortgages and then you can issue a bond off the back of that credit, whereas you probably couldn't do that for the individual mortgage. The same with solar, small scale solar. You get enough of that, yes, you can wrap it up and put it into a bond structure. It might require some kind of credit enhancement that could come from various parties. It may not. That's just a funding tool. It's more a funding tool than a risk management tool. The underlying risks are are going to be allocated somehow. But it's more a funding tool. Can you access it? Does it create a series of cash flows that suit a security that an investor for an investor? Yeah, it's
All
probably
right.
more a
Yeah.
funding mechanism.
Yeah. So I think thank you once again. Can we just appreciate Matthew for answering our questions? So like I said, I mean the time is running very fast, so you can just do it, send a mail, because like you said, some of these questions require a lot more thoughts, right? So we would need to actually reply them in writing. So just do
Yeah.
it to reach out via mail. And I don't know if you has anything you want to say on the call, because he was our last speaker and I saw you drop the question.
Yes.
So probably you have something to say. I'll give him 1 minute before we do our vote of thanks.
Thank you, Peace, for being so nice. I really wasn't the last speaker. I was a little bit earlier than that. Matt and I have had an interesting history together. He was a director of a company I was CEO of. So we've had an opportunity to work together, and he was one of the most dependable directors in the business, and also took a very studious perspective of what was happening. And I think that he's brought and demonstrated that studious approach, and that the real value of the connection that you've made for people with Matt is he is very much a promoter of projects, an investor in projects, and he has an ability to see deficiencies in plans and make things possible. And I really wish that when you had been doing your demonstration of what Chemotronics is trying to do, you had actually had a prelude of where Matt had taken a look at your plans, because a number of the questions that were asked actually fit into your own project. But it's good to see Matt again. It's been a long time since we've seen
It was
each
last
other.
century. It was last century here. We won't tell them
It
that.
was a century ago. You are correct. So, but Matt, it's good. It's good to see you and to
Yeah, it's
hear a fair
likewise.
dinkum Aussie accent again. And I hope to have a chance to see you on some future trip back to
Yes.
Australia.
Well, we've also just opened our US office.
Oh, where did you open it?
LA. It's a long story, but my co-founder and chief investment officer, his son won a basketball scholarship to one of the schools there that's a feeder into the college system. And so given that we're actually possibly going to invest in at least one US company, we'll